Hello and welcome to the Futures Lab. So, this week we're doing something that has been long requested in the YouTube comments. We are finally putting mercy into our Undertale game. As you know, Undertale lets you choose violence or peace. When you select mercy in your menu, you actually get given these two options here, spare and flee. And this is actually how both act and item also work. So if fight, act, item and mercy are our menu, then when we open them up and they give us more options, those are going to be our sub-menu. So this is a good opportunity to make some code that works not only for mercy, but also works for item and act. Okay, so we're going to paint a new sprite, and we're going to call this Submenu. I'm going to drag my Submenu sprite so you can see it from behind the video of my face. I'm just going to put it right here next to where we've got our menu. Now we're going to make different costumes for different options in our submenu. So we're going to need one for spare and one for flee. Now to start off, select your text tool, make sure that we've got it on white, and just make a star. And I'm going to make sure that this is in the pixel font as well. And then make sure that this star is nicely centered. Double click on it so you can type in some more text. And I'm going to type in spare. And then I'm going to duplicate this costume, double click on the text, and call this flee. Let's make sure the costumes are named the same thing. So costume 2, I'm going to call that flee, and costume 1, I'm going to call that spare. Now we use clones to make our 4 different menu options, and we're going to do the same thing with all of our sub-menu options. We're going to use clones. So let's head to the code, and let's use a list to keep track of how many options we have. Now a list is kind of like a variable, but where a variable can only hold one piece of information, a list can hold multiple pieces of information, and you can add and delete those pieces of information as well. Think about it like a shopping list. If you're going out and buying 3 things, once you've gotten one of those things, you can cross it off the shopping list. Now, this is useful to have multiple pieces of information stored in one place, but it's also really useful because when we come to use the item, you can actually delete items after you've used them. So let's say you have a healing item like a cake. Once you eat that cake and regain a bunch of health, the cake gets deleted from the list, which means it won't show up in the future when you open up your item submenu. So let's build our first list, shall we? Go to events and get out when green flag clicked. Then go to variables, scroll down until you find make a list. Click on that. We're going to call this list Mercy Submenu. Make sure this is for all sprites and then press OK. Then pull out Add Thing to Submenu and pull out another Add Thing to Submenu. The first thing we're going to add is going to be flee, and the next thing we're going to add is going to be spare. Now let's see if these get added to the list. Let's press go on our project. Excellent, we've got flee and spare inside our mercy submenu. But click one more time on that green flag and see what happens. It keeps adding them to the list. To fix this problem, we actually need to empty out the list to make sure that it doesn't bring all of the items from the previous game forwards into the next game. So look for delete all of mercy submenu, drag that out and make sure it goes right underneath when green flag clicked. We need to delete everything in the mercy submenu first, and then we add our new items to the list once it's been nicely cleared out. Give the green flag one more click, and there we go, much better. Now while we're here, let's go to looks and get out a hide and put that right underneath when green flag clicked. We need to hide the original sprite because we're going to be making clones, and those are going to be the ones that we see. Now let's make a new broadcast. Go to events and bring out when I receive broadcast. Click right here and select new message, and we're going to call this message mercy. Press OK. Now we need to make some code that goes underneath when I receive Mercy that creates clones for each of the options inside our Mercy submenu. So we're going to create a new variable to keep count of how many of these we're making. So let's go to Variables, click on Make a Variable, and we're going to call this variable Index. Then make sure you click for this sprite only and press OK. We're going to set index to 0. Now we need to decide where these submenu options are going to be. Now I quite like where this one is right now. There's a bit of space for the heart to be here eventually, just like it's here. So I'm going to do something very similar to the coordinates here. Go to Motion, get out Go to X, Y, put it here, and I'm going to set the X to be -130 and the Y to be 0. Now we need to make clones for each item in our list, which is currently only 2, but it could be a lot more once we're doing Act and Item submenus. So let's go to Control, get out a Repeat 10, drag that and put it here, and go to Variables, scroll down until you get to all of the list codes and look for Length of Mercy submenu. Drag that out and put it inside the repeat there. So if the length of our list is 2, then this repeat is going to happen 2 times. Perfect. Now let's get out a change index by 1. We are going to use this number to keep track of where we are in the list each time we make a clone. So when index is 1, we're going to make the first item in the list flee. And when index is 2, we're going to make the second item in the list spare. So go to Looks, get out Switch Costume to, put it right here, then go to Variables. Scroll down until you find something called Item 1 of Mercy submenu. Drag that out and put it over Switch Costume to. Then we're going to get our index variable and drop it over the 1 in Item 1. So what costume are we actually going to switch to each time? Well, first the code will ask, what index number are we up to? Is it 1? Then it will look in the list and for number 1 in the list, which is flee, and then it will look in the costumes for a costume named flee. If the index is 2, then it's going to look in the list for number 2, and it's going to find that that item is called spare, and then it's going to go into costumes and look for a costume called spare. So it's very important that your costumes here are spelt exactly the same as the items in your list. And this is case sensitive, so capital letters do matter. They have to be exactly the same. Now I've got to make sure that we make the clone, so go to Control, look for Create Clone of Myself, put that underneath Switch Costume. Then let's make sure that each time we make the clone, we move down so that there's space in between all of the items in our submenu. Let's go to Motion and get out Change Y by, let's say, -30. Now, depending on the size of your text in your costumes, you can make this a smaller or a larger number to make them closer or further away from each other. Now we need to make sure we give our clones some instructions when they are created. So go to Control, get out When I Start as Clone, go to Looks and get out a Show, because remember we hid the original sprite. Now let's test it and see what happens. Hit the green flag and the spare should disappear, that's fine. And now double click on When I Receive Mercy, and there we go, we've got flee and spare being created. Now if you want these to appear in a different order, you want spare and then flee, all you need to do is rearrange the order here in the list. So if we do that, so we've got spare then flee, and I'm going to start this again, click on Mercy again, and now you can see it's spare first, then flee after. This list controls the order. Okay, great, that's everything that we need in our submenu sprite. So now let's put some controls into our heart so that we can navigate this submenu. Head over to your heart sprite and look around for when green flag clicked. Now there's two of these in here, but one of them is labeled projectile collision, and we don't want that one. This is the main one that we use, the forever loop that controls all the different code that's in our my blocks depending on which mode we're in. We are going to be adding in a new mode. So right click on one of these if mode equals, duplicate, put it nicely underneath like this, and we're going to rename this to Mercy. We're going to get rid of this menu and go to My Blocks, click on Make a Block, and call this Mercy. Then press OK. Drag out a Mercy block and put it inside if mode equals Mercy, and then drag off your define Mercy somewhere where you've got lots of space underneath it. Before we put any code into our define Mercy, we need to make sure that we can actually enter the Mercy mode, which means we need to look for define menu, look towards the bottom, and here we've got if key space pressed, and if the menu button selected equals 0, then set mode to fight and broadcast fight. Now our menu button selected variable, remember, is the number that goes up and down depending on which of these 4 menu items we have selected. Fight is 0, act is 1, item is 2, and mercy is 3. So hover over if menu button selected equals 0, right click on the if, duplicate, and put this directly underneath. We're going to change this to if menu button selected equals 3, set mode to mercy, and broadcast mercy. Now we're ready to put in some code underneath define mercy. First thing we need to do is make sure that our heart moves over here on the screen. So let's go to motion and let's set X of the heart, and let's set it to minus 150. From memory, we have our submenu at minus 130, so minus 150 should be a bit left of that. That should work out quite well, but you can change this number on your project if you like. Now we need to figure out the Y coordinate of our heart. So let's get out set Y to 0, and let's see what that looks like. So with your program started, make sure you highlight mercy, then press the space bar. There we go, that's looking pretty good. I think the heart should be just a little bit higher. Okay, that's looking much better. I'm pretty happy with that. So now we're going to create a variable that's going to keep track of which of these mercy options we have selected with our heart. So let's go to variables and let's click on make a variable. Now we did something very similar with our menu buttons. We called it menu button selected. So this time we can call it submenu button selected. And we can probably say for this sprite only, and then press OK. Now let's make some code that moves this number up and down using the up arrow and the down arrow. So go to control, get out an if then, go to sensing, get out a key space pressed, change that to up arrow, go to variables and get out change submenu button selected by -1, then right click, duplicate this whole thing and make it so that by pressing down arrow we change the submenu button selected by 1. So let's give that a test, shall we? When we're in mercy, now when we press up, the number goes down into the minus numbers, and when we press down, the number goes up. Good, very good. Now we're going to use this variable to update our Y coordinate. Go to operators, get out a minus operator, and put it into your set Y. Put 5 into the first socket, then get out a multiplied by operator, put it into the second. The gap between the submenu was about 30 from memory, so let's type in 30 pixels is the gap between each submenu item. Then go to variables and get out submenu button selected, and put it into the second socket. Let's give that a test now. So if we use the up and down arrows, we can carefully make sure that this variable gets to 0. And you can see that 0 is set to our first option, and then if we go down very gently, 1 is set to our second option. And that's all good, but unfortunately, we can just keep going above and below where we're meant to be. So let's fix that, shall we? First, let's do the easy one. When we're going up, we never want the number to go lower than 0. So go to Control, get out an if, then put it right underneath, key up arrow pressed, go to Operators, and get out a more than operator. Put it right here. Then go to Variables, get out your submenu button Selected Variable, click on 50, and type in 0. So as long as the number is more than 0, we can make the number go down, but once it gets to 0, we can no longer make the number go down. Let's give that a test, shall we? So when we select Mercy, now when I'm pressing up, you can see the heart will not go any higher. Perfect. Now we need to fix the other direction. So let's go to Control and get out an if then, and put it underneath if key down arrow pressed. Now go to Operators and get out a less than. Put it right here. Go to Variables and get out submenu button Selected and put it into the first socket. Now we could just put a number here, like let's say the number 2, because that's the number of items in our Mercy submenu. But then if we added more items in or took some away, the code would stop working. So let's be smart and let's go to Variables and look down until we find length of Mercy submenu. Put it right here, and then this means that the code will adapt to however long or short the menu is. Let's give it a test, and we're going to run into a little bit of a problem because we can go one lower than we're meant to. And if you think about it, that actually makes sense, because remember, this variable starts at 0. It doesn't start at 1. So we've got 0, then 1, then 2. So a nice easy thing to fix. All we need to do is go to Operators and get out a minus operator. Drag that out, put it here, get your length of Mercy submenu, put it into the first socket, get the whole thing, put it back over that 50, and put a 1 right here. So we just take away 1 from whatever number we have as the length of our list. Let's give it a test. And now we can only move between the options here. Perfect, that's excellent. Now if we're in our submenu and we've changed our mind and we actually want to cancel out of this submenu to return to the menu along the bottom, we need some way of doing that. So let's code in a cancel button on our keyboard, a button that says no to things, that says cancel to things, that backs you out of options. And that brings us also to the button that we've been using so far to say yes to things, the button that we've been using to select things, which has been spacebar so far. In the original Undertale game, it's the X button on your keyboard that's cancel, and the Z button on your keyboard that's OK. So we're going to code in a cancel button using X, and we're also going to update our code so that instead of using spacebar to select things, we're using Z. So go to Control, get out an if then, we'll get out key X pressed, and then all we need to do to cancel out of that menu, that submenu, is set our mode back to menu mode. Let's give that a test, shall we? So when we start the game, our mode is menu mode. We can select our menu options, and then if I press spacebar on Mercy, now we're in the Mercy mode. But if I press X, we're back to the menu mode. But we will need some code to make sure that this spare and flee delete themselves once we've left the Mercy mode. Let's sort that now, shall we? Head back to your submenu, sprite, look down until you find when I start as clone. So once these are created, we need them to delete themselves if we ever leave the mercy mode. So that's nice and easy. We just need to go to control and get out a wait until not equals, we need mode equals mercy. So now, once the mode is not mercy, make sure you've spelled this correct, we need to go to control and get out a delete this clone. Let's give that a test, shall we? So now, when I press X, excellent, our spare and flee options disappear. Let's finish off the code in our heart. Let's copy this if key X pressed and make it if key Z pressed. We're going to set the mode to evade, and we're also going to broadcast evade. And that will ensure that when we select one of those options, it will start the next attack. Now let's update the code in our project that references pressing the space bar so that we're using the Z key instead. So look for define menu and then look down until you find if key space pressed and change that to if key Z pressed. And we should probably do the same thing in the fight sprite. Yep, just here underneath when I receive fight, change that as well. That should be everything. Let's go back to the heart and let's give it a test and see if it all works. So now that I'm using the Z key to select things, I'm going to press Z here. That was interesting. We skipped through something there, didn't we? Let's try it again. Now if I'm really, really careful and gentle, no. This is actually caused because when we're pressing the Z key in our code here, we're still pressing the Z key by the time this code kicks in here. So it skips us all the way through faster than we could really respond. So what we need to do is put in some form of wait after we press the if key Z pressed here underneath our define menu code. So get out a wait until and put it right underneath here if key Z pressed. Then we're going to go to operators, get out not, and duplicate this key Z pressed. So now we're going to wait until key Z is not pressed. So if we hold down the Z button, it will only perform the action after we've let go of the Z button. Let's see if that makes it any better. So we'll start the game. I'm going to press Z now. I'm going to hold it down. And then when I let go, there we go. Now we have our options here, and I'm going to select spare, and for now it just puts us into the next battle. One nice little touch is if we put right underneath our wait until not key Z pressed a set submenu button selected to 0, that means that our heart will always be on the first item of our list of options. The other thing that we can do as well is just put in some weights. I would say maybe just wait 0.1 seconds and another wait 0.1 seconds. Put them right underneath our change submenu button selected by -1 and by +1. This is very similar to the code that we put into our menu button to make it so that it was less slippery. You'll notice that when we were moving the heart up and down, the controls were very slippery. Sometimes you only meant to go up or down by 1, and you went up or down by much more than 1. Another little trick that we need to do just to make sure that our controls don't feel laggy is we just need to copy this set Y, duplicate that, but get rid of all of this stuff underneath it. We don't need that. We only need this little bit. Duplicate that and put it right above the wait 0.1s. As before, very similar to the code that we put into our define menu, but just makes the controls feel a lot better. And that's everything for this week. In the coming weeks, we're going to be doing something that everyone's been asking for, Currently, when you go into evade mode, it's always the same attacks each time, but we are going to have the ability to make different levels or attack waves, whatever you want to call them. Each time you end the turn, go into the evade mode, it will be different. We're even going to have dialogue coming up fairly soon from the enemy, so stay tuned for that. And if you're interested, subscribe or ring the bell to see the notifications for when the next episodes are available. Let me know in the comments, as always, what you would like me to do next, or if you need any help with your project. And aside from that, stay awesome, be cool to each other, and take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time, ninjas.